Okay, so we are back again with the Toshiba Dynabook 386, and we're going to start working on the power supply because today I got a package from Mouser Electronics, and in it contained the capacitors that I ordered for this computer. I was going to work on the K-Pro first, but since I actually have the proper power supply for this computer, I figured we'll go ahead and work on this one first. The first step we're going to do, and I had this wrapped in the towel, and you can see how much guck has come off of it. But first thing we're going to do is go ahead and clean it, and all we have is just an old baking pan, and we're going to spray it with electronic cleaner and just give it a light scrub with an old toothbrush. So let's go ahead and do that. And to try and get all the leaked electrolyte off of it. Okay, almost good enough. We still got some down in the contacts of the, we'll remove this little plastic insulator piece here so we're able to get under that as well. Old toothbrushes come in handy. Okay, and what's left around a connector, it looks like it may be flux residue. I'm not sure. Doesn't seem to want to be coming off. It's definitely thick, that's for sure. But we'll be trying that to get that clean a little later. But yeah, I'll go ahead and continue doing this and we'll be right back. Okay, so we have the board cleaned off, and I have already selected and trimmed the leads on our new capacitors, and all the capacitors that I've purchased are Nichicon capacitors. As you can see, this is a 25 volt 220 microfarad capacitor. Same exact thing that is in here now, and you can see it is a bit smaller. But anyway, the convenient thing is they actually have the positive terminal labeled on the power supply board here. So we'll go ahead and remove the ones that are on here. And solder wick would come in handy in a process like this. This is a little too small to use my desoldering iron on, but we'll set these aside to test at a later time. Okay, so those are out. I'm not sure if our holes are clear or not, but we will go ahead and reinstall them. And figures I bent the leads in the wrong direction, so we'll go ahead and flip them around the other way here. Alright, so now we're ready to reinstall. And like I said, a solder wick would definitely come in handy. In order to remove the old solder from the connection points. But once we get them in there, we can just heat them up and they should slide right in. Should. Okay, there's one in, and we'll give it a little dab of fresh solder to ensure a good connection. Being careful not to bridge the connection with anything else. Okay, one down, one to go. So I'll go ahead and turn the camera off, get the other one done, and then we'll move on to the motherboard. So now we have the motherboard removed from the case, and we're going to start by cleaning again. And you can see on the bottom of this one where there's even a drip over here from the leaking capacitor. And there's some corrosion over here. I'm sure you can't see it on this camera, but anyway, we're going to go ahead and clean that off the same way we did with the other one. And then once that's completed, we will be back and replacing the capacitors on here. So about an hour later, we have all of the capacitors replaced, and had a little bit of trouble with a couple of them, namely these three right here, because the original ones were a bit longer and a bit narrower, and not to mention my soldering iron that I have is not exactly made to be used for something like this, or it's not the best choice to use for something like this. It's just a standard soldering pencil, no heat control or anything. So we did end up lifting a solder pad on this capacitor, but the through holes are still good, and from what I can see, that's where the contact is. The pads that are on these only aid in providing a firmer connection due to the fact that the capacitors are laying on their side instead of standing straight up and down. So anyway, time to reassemble, and then we'll see if this thing works. As I was putting this thing back together, happened to notice one more capacitor that I overlooked, that's actually in the top housing on the LED display board. But luckily it is a 220 UF 25 volt, same as the ones in the power supply and everything, so I do have a spare. So we're going to go ahead and replace that as well before we continue with the reassembly. It's a good thing I did take this apart to check it. I'm not sure if you can see that there, but in this hole, this pass-through hole where the screw goes through, there's actually a film that I just popped, like a bubble, of electrolyte that has leaked out of this capacitor. So yeah. Definitely, if you have to get capacitors, do not purchase, where's the name of it? What are these others? Elna or something like that. Yes, Elna, E-L-N-A, long life capacitor. So yeah, we're going to replace this and then continue with the reassembly, and we'll be back in a bit.